everyone. We're here today at the East Texas Fruit and Vegetable Conference, and I have with me Dr. Tom Isakeit.
Isakeit.
Yes. Excuse me. Who is a plant pathologist as well as a professor at Texas A&M. And Tom, tell us about your job and what your passions are as far as your job goes.
So my specific appointment is extension specialist, so that means I work providing information to people in Texas in general, specifically farmers, field crop farmers, but I'll get questions from other people. And my objective is try to solve their disease problems, come up with solutions that maintain their profitability and their ability to continue to produce crops.
Okay. And what crops are you specialized in certain things?
Well, I mainly specialized on certain diseases that occur on corn, cotton, and sorghum. But I also have a background in working with watermelons.
Okay.
But anything related to plant disease that comes up as an issue in Texas, I've at least dealt with that.
Right.
If I can't answer a specific question about, say, for example, turf problems, I know people who can.
Right.
And so that's also part of my job as being a facilitator, to be able to connect people that need that information with the people that have it, if I can't provide that information myself.
Right. And you've been in Texas a number of years, and you said you worked in the Rio Grande Valley.
So yes, I started my job at Texas A&M back in 1993, working in the lower Rio Grande Valley for 5 years. It felt more like 10 just because they have a continuous season, so you have several different crops a year, and perennial crops, for example, the citrus and the sugar cane. So there's always something going on there. They're not down for the winter like other places.
Right.
But that was a great way to get a very quick familiarization with a lot of disease problems for warm, wet climates.
Okay. And currently you're more at Texas A&M and you teach as well as do research, or?
Well, so at Texas A&M College Station, I actually don't have a teaching appointment. I do work with graduate students and interact with them. I have more of a research focus, but again, it's very problem-oriented, solving grower problems. Growers will call me up, and they might have a question I can answer on the spot, or sometimes it does require doing experimentation to figure out. We often get new disease epidemics coming into the state, and I'm one of the people that has to deal with that, to figure out what the cause is and figure out solutions for that as well.
So when that happens, I suppose you have to travel, do samples, do research?
Yes, there's a lot of travel. The most recent thing is the outbreak of a new fungal disease on cotton in El Paso. Wow. So I have been traveling to El Paso to work with the locals on that. And it really does underscore the need for people with expertise in plant pathology, because these growers had that problem for several years, and it's only when they had bare fields instead of fields with cotton plants in it did they call out for some help.
Oh.
And there was no person stationed locally in El Paso that they could go to for that.
So they had a decline until it got really critical.
They noticed these plants aren't growing. What's going on? And then once the plant pathologist got involved, it was very easy to diagnose the problem. And because of the nature of this disease, it really started a lot of efforts from Texas A&M University and the Growers Cotton Incorporated to do something so that it doesn't spread to other parts of the state or other parts of the eastern United States.
Well, that's really gratifying, isn't it, to be involved in that, to know that you really made a difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, that is correct, and that's just the latest disease epidemic I've been involved in. There's been waves of introduced diseases from other countries that have come in, and we've had fears about them devastating the economy. For example, soybean rust disease came from Asia, and we were worried about it destroying soybean production in the United States. And it was a multi-state effort. I was helping in Texas to manage, to monitor where this disease was. And actually my impact was to help growers to save money by not spraying fungicides. I was able to tell them, look, I'm not seeing this thing as a problem. You do not need to spend any money on fungicides, so you can save that money because because of the lack of information about how this disease worked. People were in a panic mode and just ready, and it's just not necessary. But that also took the expertise in order to learn about it and make that determination.
And that's really helpful to farmers who often work on a very narrow profit margin, right? I mean,
absolutely.
If you can save them there, that is a huge help.
And it magnifies, so it's saving across the United States. We estimated tens of billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm. So it really is not a problem. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct. Well, I take that back a little bit. Under most conditions, it's not a problem, but I can also list areas where it would be a problem and they would need to be proactive about it.
Sure.
But it's not to the extent that they couldn't grow soybeans either. We know enough about how this thing works that we can tell them, okay, if you're going to plant in this time of year, you need to go out in your fields, and we tell them what to look for and when to decide to do the spray. So they don't have to spray blindly, but they can do it in an informed way that they know there's a risk and they can do the right thing to prevent the materialization of a problem later on.
Okay. So things are imported, unimported food, and shipping in all sorts of ways.
Well, these diseases, the cotton problem probably came in on the seed, but other diseases have blown in. Like, for example, soybean rust came in on a hurricane.
Oh my goodness.
So it blew over probably from Africa to Brazil and spread from Brazil up north and first landed in the United States as far as we can determine by one of the hurricanes back in 2004.
So the air can carry pathogens.
It can carry some of the pathogens long ways. Yes, other ones not so. And that explains why we're not overrun by diseases either.
Well, that's true. That's true.
So it's the absence of certain pathogens. And the other thing, too, that we have going for us is the climate. And of course, looking at Texas, we have different climates in Texas. In some parts are more prone to disease problems than other parts.
Right. East Texas with the high humidity.
Yeah. I talked earlier about problems with vegetable diseases that in this part of the state, it has the highest amount of rainfall for Texas, and that tends to drive diseases that you see on the foliage, both bacterial and fungal diseases.
Right. Because if you have the right temperature and the right moisture, with fungal diseases, there you go.
That's exactly correct.
Right. If you can control one of those, then you can solve it. Yeah, exactly. So, interesting job.
Yeah, it is, and there's a lot of traveling around to different parts of the state, and I get to see perspectives from other areas. Things that, for example, I do have a favorite with watermelons, and watermelon growers in East Texas face different disease problems than those out in West Texas bordering New Mexico.
Okay. So what type of diseases do we see here?
Well, there can be devastating diseases like downy mildews.
Okay.
And downy mildew is something that also blows in, gets carried up by the wind, and the rain brings the spores down. And of course, the rain makes the leaves wet, so that if the leaves are wet for several hours, that gives them time for the fungus to infect.
Perfect storm.
Yes. And there's been research done in predicting how these diseases move, and we know the conditions in which they cause problems. And I talked earlier about one particular network that's out there where people from all over the U.S. report in whether they're seeing any particular disease. And if they can plug this information into sort of like a weather forecasting model, and if they know the point source of the problem, they can predict in a week or so where that will go.
Amazing.
So that's very helpful for growers in certain areas like West Texas. They might rarely see this disease like downy mildew, so they don't routinely put preventative sprays for it like they would in East Texas, where it's more of a constant year in, year out type thing. So they're also working with much thinner profit margins. So they can't really afford to spray a fungicide, but if they don't spray it in a timely manner, they can lose their whole crop.
So the bulletins are put out, and when you see these conditions coming?
Yes, they can actually go to a website and find this information, and if they monitor the website, then that's what they need to do.
So communication is way better today, isn't it, with all of that? Just not that many years ago, with the websites.
It's gotten better and better.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
Well, I guess since this is based on a program for vegetable gardening, there's a lot of home gardening. I talked about all sorts of diseases out there, and one of the things that people are asking about, well, what about composting? What will composting do for plant diseases? And there's most of the diseases will not survive composting.
Amazing.
So there's virus diseases. Viruses require a living host, so as soon as the plant is dead, it's dead. And there's certain bacterial and fungal diseases on causing leaf spots and such. And those will also die out over time, especially if the material is composted.
Okay.
But we did stress the importance of having that plant material compost fully. So if it's not partially composted, or if it's only partially composted, that's probably not enough. And there's certain plant diseases that you cannot safely get rid of them by composting. They're very persistent. The fungi can live as saprophytes. They like higher temperatures. But for most home gardening situations, yes, you can get rid of, or you don't have to worry about plant diseases carrying over if you compost them.
Right, and then make sure your compost gets to a certain temperature, right? Is
Yes, yes. A lot of people will just put piles on, and that's a very slow composting process. There are other ways, mixing it up on a regular basis that foster the growth of certain bacteria that really like high temperatures and decompose the residue. So that can happen very quickly, and that'll also decompose the residue much more quickly as well.
Right. Okay. Okay. Just lost my thought. That's a good question. But do you have any more information for local vegetable people?
So I think in terms of people that have commercial vegetable farms where they have several acres of one crop, they're very vulnerable to diseases. They need to know of the diseases present in their area, and they also need to be proactive in spraying for them. And a lot of the fungicides that are used are not available to home gardeners. In comparison, home gardeners tend to have smaller amounts of very diverse crops, and they'll not likely have serious disease problems that they have to worry about.
As when you have a monoculture, like a large field of the same thing.
So part of what I do is, okay, this is what the disease is, and you don't really need to spray for it. We talked a little bit about organic farmers, and it's more difficult with organic farming. They apparently make more money from their produce, so they can suffer more yield losses from diseases. But generally, they're not at risk to be wiped out. And in my opinion, I think the worst thing for organic farming, the greatest hurdle, weeds. I wouldn't worry about diseases as much as I would weeds.
Real interesting.
Because they can't use herbicides.
Oh yeah, and then it's labor intensive to remove it. That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And home gardeners have the luxury. If you only have half a dozen tomato plants, if you lose one or two, it's not like someone who's making their living from the farm.
Yes.
I mean, you can simply hold them out and start over. I mean, you could use that approach.
Yeah, it's
Whereas
not
if you're
like
making
their
a
livelihood
living,
is dependent on it.
It's a whole different thing. It really is. It really is. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Enjoyed it very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All righty.
Let's
Thank
get lunch.
Tom for some lunch. Yeah. Go ahead.